afternoon and welcome to this week's edition of the Mashreq Sustainable Finance Dialogues podcast, a series where we explore where money and capital meets the great energy transition and the pathway to net zero. Coming out of COP27, recently completed in Egypt, we're now firmly on the pathway to COP28, which of course will be hosted in the United Arab Emirates in less than 12 months now. So time is already passing. Today we're going to tackle the question of what's the region's role in accelerating the energy transition. Of course, a very privileged opportunity to host back-to-back COPs in the Middle East. And so with that, of course, is a responsibility to advance the great challenge, tackling the great challenge of climate change. And so let's kick off today with our host, Badr Chowdhury, Senior Vice President, Sector Head of Energy at Mashreq Bank, to make some opening remarks, maybe some of his top takeaways from COP27 to set us off. Badr.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you for my colleagues. So just to summarize what we were able to gather from the COP27 and going into COP28, I think it is quite clear that energy is the foundation of modern society. It has in the past and will continue to fuel essential industries, healthcare, commerce, transport, and logistics. Importantly, it is also a critical and crucial enabler of the UAE Sustainable Development Goals, and without which you cannot achieve the necessary uplift of approximately 600 million people who do not have electricity in Africa alone, for example. So at COP27, we noted that there was sufficient discussion around the need to solve the ever crucial energy trilemma. And effectively, we saw the need to actually meet that energy trilemma while also solving for the environmental sustainability. In setting this context, it is crucial to identify the roadmap and the milestones for how we will get there. I'm pleased to say that UAE is playing a strong leadership role globally, which was evidenced by the 100 billion partnership for accelerating clean energy, which was announced between the UAE and the US. Again, that this catalyst is intended to enable deployment of investments in the clean energy space in the US, in UAE, and in the emerging economies by 2035. More importantly, at Mashreq, we are committed to facilitate 30 billion in sustainable financing by 2030, and we are in particular keen to be sector agnostic. So we will be looking at energy space, logistics, transport, and all sectors of the economy, because we believe that all sectors of economic activity are key contributors towards this transition.
Thank you, Badr. Let's welcome Masood Ahmed Al-Hamadi, Exploration and Production Manager at Sharjah National Oil Corporation. Your opening remarks on what's the region's role in accelerating the energy transition.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Masood.
All. It's my pleasure to be here with this important topic. It's very, very hot topic. Everybody's talking about it. We just finished COP27. It's the right time now. It seems like UAE started talking about COP28 even before 27. I heard a lot of discussions, articles talking about the preparation. As you know, I'm not saying that because it's UAE. UAE wants to be unique. The team being involved on COP27 wanted to see what the outcomes will be before even starts, and to prepare for one of the most important event Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid mentioned recently, I think yesterday, that in 2023 will be the most important event for the UAE and for region. To have 2 events in the Middle East, it shows that the Middle East is looking after the climate change and want to do the implementation more than the pledge only. So I think it's very important role that we have to play, everybody, to collaborate and cooperate to reach to our net zero and to show the globe that we are really leading this change. We're just not talking. So I think COP28, everybody's waiting for it, and we want to see the changes. It is in the venue that it's just, we finished last year Expo. I think it's very smart way that put in the venue that was it was talk about worldwide, and we are talking about the COP, which is it's packed every single person in the 8 billion people in there. So it's very important to everybody to collaborate. I like to thank Mashreq Bank to host this. That means we are all sitting and going in the right direction to work together. Technical guys, and funding guys, everybody sitting together, and who is putting the regulation for us, inshallah, soon, Aisha, and they're really optimistic that we are heading to the right direction with a lot of challenges. Everybody knows that it's not easy roadmap.
It's not, Masood, and I'd like to just quickly follow up with you. It's not easy, is clearly it's not easy for the world, it's not easy for the region, but particularly wanted your assessment on, obviously, you're an E&P production manager with Sharjah National Oil Corporation. Where do we see the opportunity for the energy industry to now have a seat at the table, and how important is that in order for these big challenges to be met?
Luckily, we are working with and we are chasing gas. The gas, everybody is talking about it as a transition fuel. And what we are doing is trying to explore more gas resources and to help this transition to happen in a smooth way, instead of just switching to the new energy sources without really having the roadmap or transition in the best way. So our role is really key for next decade to come. We have to be efficient. We have to make sure that what we have to continue to explore in an efficient way, because any excess gas that we could have in the future, we can convert it to hydrogen, for example. A lot of studies here and there happening in the R&D level yet. But it's really proof that the gas is a minimum carbon that you can get from the fuel, that it's really less intensive of the carbon. So yeah, right. So this is our vision. We can talk about it more during the discussion.
I'd certainly welcome Engineer Aisha Al-Abdouli, Director Green Development and Climate Change at the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment at the UAE. Engineer Aisha, of course, the UAE host of COP28, one of the most important energy producing countries in the world. I'd also welcome your views on that same question, the role that should oil and gas companies have for the energy transition, and within that, in the context of hosting COP26 in Glasgow, 27 in Egypt, and now 28. 26 oil and gas companies were not invited to attend. 27, of course, they participated, and now coming 28. But I'm wondering, from your perspective, what role should oil and gas companies have for the energy transition?
Well, thank you very much, Sean, for this introduction, and I would like to thank our host, Mashreq Bank, for hosting us in this dialogue today, and the organizer for organizing this. And I'm really happy to join all of you today in this dialogue. And you spotted in the right way, Sean, how should the oil and gas companies can have, or what role they have for the energy transition. To start with, Sean, let's highlight a point that we cannot underestimate the size of the challenge ahead. And the world needs an estimated 50 to 60 trillion over the next 30 years to decarbonize industrial and energy systems by 2050. No single nation or economic bloc can achieve this scale alone, and it will require new models of government and the private sector funding for that. So let me start with a few examples in this regard. So the world must accelerate the transition to cleaner energy, and the shortest way to do so is the net zero. So to get in there, we need to pick up the pace in creating global collaborations that deliver both economic and climate progress through programmatic, realistic, practical, and commercially viable initiatives. As you may be aware and already saw in the media and the people, the colleagues who were already at COP, you remember that we announced to the lead to COP27, one of the largest and most ambitious collaboration of its kind, and that was a new UAE, United States partnerships for accelerating clean energy, or what's called as PACE. So the goal is to catalyze actually $100 trillion in financing and investment to deploy 100 new gigawatts of clean energy in United States, in UAE, and emerging economies by 2035. So that initiative actually addresses the reality that if the basic energy needs of billions of people are not met, then economies will slow down significantly.
Like we're seeing in Europe today.
Sorry?
Like we are seeing in Europe today with the energy crisis.
Exactly, and that will impact the resources made available for climate action. So we need to focus on pragmatic progress to drive the energy transition, and we can create new industries, new skills, and new jobs. So I would also like to add to that the experience that we have here in UAE as one of the largest investor and operators of renewable energy projects. UAE has been accelerating clean energy solutions through international public-private partnerships for over 2 decades, and we had invested over $50 billion in 70 countries, from developed economies to small island nations, and from utility-sized mega projects to bespoke site-specific solutions. So whatever the size, whatever the place, these projects are all designed to reduce the carbon impacts and to be economically self-sustaining.
Thank you, Aisha. Badr, I wanted just to follow up on that. Coming out of COP27, of course, you were there in Egypt. How did you find the discussions around the thesis of and energy, if you like? Everybody, given the critical, as you said, the critical importance of energy in life and economic well-being. But I'm wondering, from that perspective of this theme that's emerging for COP28 in the UAE, that was surfaced before COP27, and rather than or. How was that received? How was it discussed at COP27 in Egypt?
The realization is that the investment in the energy from the supply side as well as the demand side is still the most effective climate solution that we have, right? It is the sort of the journey or the transition that has been chalked out needs to be managed in a way that it does not impact the global economic activity, and that is what probably has been evident in Europe. I think that is where the energy trilemma, which effectively before the crisis in Europe was more towards energy transition, energy affordability, and then of course the energy security. That crisis actually led to the realization that the journey has to be managed more effectively, where all stakeholders need to be given the opportunity to be part of the journey. And we see that as a favorable outcome, where it is also important to highlight that as mentioned by my colleague, Mr. Masood, that it is the players like SNOC who are playing important role in the transition. The journey from to low emission hydrocarbons to effectively completely walking away from the carbon emitting hydrocarbons. So that's how the journey effectively is being addressed now.
Masood, just picking up on that, the idea of moving forward with COP27 now behind us, but COP28 in front of us, again, coming back to how can the region leverage these COPs as a platform for advancing some of our own primary initiatives we've seen in recent years, as mentioned there by Engineer Aisha, of what we've achieved in renewables and solar, and now with the new initiatives that are becoming so important, like green hydrogen. What role, how can we leverage these COP27, now 28 in the region, to achieve some of those new targets, new fuels, new low carbon fuels?
Yes, Sean, as my colleague mentioned, and Engineer Aisha, regarding the COP28 as a platform to leverage these opportunities. I think taking just one step back, what you mentioned, oil and gas company were not invited in COP26. I think was big step improved in 27 when being invited, and we believe that they should lead the transition because the expertise and the main source of energy is coming from oil and gas so far. So this is the platform for 28, as we have to look at the 27 outcomes and work on it. For example, loss and damage report finally came out, and we see a lot of the implementation, if you like, actions that should be implemented instead of just we pledge and promise. I think UAE want to play a role here to see the difference between talk and work. And I think we have a lot of...
Talk the talk and walk the walk, as they say.
Exactly. So what I hear, I think we will have a lot of actions in the environment side. I don't want to talk on behalf of Engineer Aisha, but in the environment side, that will be a key for this change. It's not about reduction of the emissions. We have to think about reduction plus creating other sources of emissions reduction. For example, we have a plan. We are entering to the business called CCS, carbon capture, storage, and utilization. Sometimes, as oil and gas companies, we have a lot of depleted reservoir. We need to invest on this, and we need to make it ready for the industry. All industries, not oil and gas, all industries to come and dispose for example, CO2. Sometimes you get the bonus when you sweep the oil out, and sometimes you just dispose it. If you don't have incentive, you wouldn't go anyway. So you have to have incentive to invest on this kind of projects. UAE investing on the renewables since 2 decades, and we know that. I think it's a very, very good time for UAE to talk about initiatives and mega projects that's been involved. And even now we're talking about not in UAE, it's other countries, for example, the US and Egypt. So we heard about the cooperation, collaboration. UAE is also working that collaboration with the other countries. I heard about the fund that rich countries should give to undeveloped countries. That's something that really we have to look at it.
Well, let's ask Engineer Aisha about that, because Engineer Aisha, of course, the UAE government is inheriting now the responsibility of COP28, and with that is to put some, if you like, meat on the bones of this announcement from COP27, a historic announcement, the creation of the Loss and Damage Fund, as it's called, to provide financing and support to those countries that are immediately at the first line of impact from the climate change. What is the UAE vision for bringing that from, as was just mentioned, walk the walk, talk the talk, now walk the walk? What is the vision for the UAE to bring that project, that fund, now with COP27 behind us, to bring it to life, if you like?
That's really very important to highlight in this aspect, because during COP27, UAE delegation led by UAE President His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed included more than 1,000 delegates and representatives of 105 leading government and private sector entities. So that was the largest ever delegation with the aim of demonstrating UAE's global climate leadership. And among the diverse participants, governments organizations took the lion's share, and followed by the private sector, including waste management and consultancy, energy and power, and also academia represented like 9%, and civil society accounted for 5%. So that shows the huge commitment that UAE expressed during its participation at this COP. The second objective related to being the host of next year's COP, we were in a listening mood to gain insights, to understand the priorities of all countries and the stakeholders. We will make sure to leverage this knowledge and to prepare a relevant program for the COP28 that builds on the great work done at COP27 and addresses the most pressing concerns and highlight the most promising opportunities. So we also explored new prospects for partnerships in the run-up to COP28. As UAE looks toward hosting COP28, which is considered to be the largest, as Masoud mentioned, COP or event in UAE, we will continue to expand effective partnerships between countries and between industries and between public and private sectors to reduce the carbon. We are committed to deliver an inclusive and solutions-oriented summit that accelerate the climate finance and enhance access to clean technologies across the vulnerable communities, and to leverage the talent of all sectors of society, including women and young people. So as we do so, we will work with the world in the pursuit of an actionable pathways to net zero by 2050. Maybe one of the, I would say, most prouding moment during the COP27 was the launch of UAE National Net Zero by 2050 pathway that will drive the implementation of UAE Net Zero by 2050 strategic initiative. As you may be aware that UAE was the first country in the MENA region to actually announce its transition or its transformation to adopt the net zero approach, and that will introduce the first country that will introduce the pathways toward achieving that goal by 2050.
Badar, just picking up on that, of course, climate finance, more equitable finance to support emerging economies, and the Paris Climate Agreement 7 years ago now, the developed countries committed to $100 billion a year to support developing economies as they took the challenge of the climate challenge on. But that financing has never transferred to the overall project, if you like, in the context of COP, but also just generally speaking, financing for green economy, green investment opportunities in emerging economies that has still struggled to attract capital. And so my question to you is, COP27, it announced a fund, the Loss and Damage Fund, but my question is wider in the context of capital coming to the green challenge, to the climate challenge, particularly in emerging economies. Have we moved the needle on that through COP27? Does COP28 give us another opportunity to advance it further? Where do you think the journey is as COP27 moves to COP28 on climate finance becoming more available more quickly to the emerging economies?
So, Sean, I think there's an important role for private banks to play here, of course. If we want to scale renewable energy projects in emerging markets, I think one of the most critical components are collaboration and the innovative financing solutions. In this respect, I think from the representing the financial institution space, what I would say is the way the deals are structured or projects are structured, it is important to attracting financing. And it is important to actually also tap the right liquidity pool, as they say, for the different projects. I think where you see the development happening is the evolution or the scalability of projects, and also as we continue to address challenges. Mind you, we do still observe that there are still challenges that need to be addressed for the further enhancement or availability of finances. One of them, of course, is the regulatory and policy, and I would say supportive policy frameworks. There is still the lack of clear and detailed international standards, which have to be widely adopted. And lastly, I think is the standardization of or what we call is critical mass of technologies, which needs to be in place. Despite that, if you recall, in 2020, Egypt launched its inaugural $750 million green bond, which was dedicated towards these investment in this space. Subsequently, you've also seen in 2022, PIF has successfully launched the 3 billion maiden green bond, which is all again targeted towards investments for green initiatives in the country. So clearly, as we move towards this energy transition, the more the adoption of international standards, the more collaboration that is witnessed, you will see the availability of finance being rolled out more aggressively.
Aisha, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the developments in the next year which could impact the approach taken at COP28. We've seen COP27 was held under the cloud of some very stressful geopolitical backdrops. Obviously, Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, growing tensions between China and the US in Asia, and other elements that are created some of the limitations perhaps of what could have been achieved at COP27, with the G20 as well, a little bit destabilized by geopolitical events. What developments in the coming months could constrain like that, or perhaps enhance international cooperation for COP28?
Well, to start with, let me just highlight a point in here. As you may be aware already, that COP27 did not start with great expectations. Till the last day of the conference, most people were thinking or believing that this would be a kind of an inconsequential meeting. But eventually, it has achieved outcomes that will have far-reaching implications for international climate change agenda. So firstly, it got developed countries to agree on something that they had refused for decades, and that is to pay for climate disasters in developing countries. And that was one of the key demands of the least developed countries and the small island nations at COP27, to set up a loss and damage fund. And this is because these countries actually have contributed the least to global warming, but are now suffering losses in billions of dollars. For example, the recent floods in Pakistan was estimated to be over $46 billion, and that is equivalent to like 13% of the country's GDP.
Over a third of the landmass of Pakistan underwater due to the floods. I mean, it's beyond comprehension scale-wise.
Exactly, and they did not contribute to that emissions,
No.
but they were affected. So, and secondly, at COP27, we negotiated something that no other climate conferences had done earlier, and that was phasing out all of the fossil fuels. And that was, it's a tragic, but a reality that it has taken 30 years for countries to realize that phasing down and ultimately phasing out is the most essential factor in limiting the global warming. And it's to the credit of India, actually, that this discussion took place. When we speak also about a third point that was reached out in the outcomes of COP27, that was related to the agreement of the countries to establish a work program for a possible future agreement to scale up support for just transitions in other developing countries. And it looks like the future financial deal between the developed and developing countries would be through just transition partnerships. So these were some of the major outcomes that were achieved at COP27 and were not be able to be achieved in the previous COPs.
On that point, looking forward, of course, the partnerships are such a critical component in this journey, in this challenge that we have mentioned earlier, and that was a central point, Masood, that you mentioned, the idea that these challenges cannot be overcome by individual sectors or countries. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, as we move towards COP28, what kinds of partnerships will be most impactful in the lead up to COP28? Will it be oil and gas companies working with environmental partners? Will it be countries on a sovereign level? Where do you think the partnerships are going to have? And obviously the nexus, water, food, and energy, all very much at the front of the news cycle at the moment. Food security, energy security. All day today, I was listening to the radio in my office. I can count maybe 10 times there was ads on about food waste. So all of this nexus is so important.
Yeah, sure. I think what our colleague mentioned as well, collaboration between all sectors. We can't go and work alone. Yes, we know that oil and gas is the backbone of the energy. We are phasing out, as Engineer Aisha mentioned. We have to be ready for the renewables. The issue we have, the challenge we have, that with the renewables and the other source of energy is not continuous. It has intermittent source of the energy.
I suppose your immediate opportunity and challenge in the partnership front over the next year is around decarbonization, that you can work with technology companies to reduce the carbon footprint of the production of oil and gas.
I think what UAE always mentioned, and for example, the opening speech in ADIPEC, that we always welcome the investors and technology provider. I think the technology provider is the key to enhance that part of the business. We have to be how we can be efficient without having smart or transformation to digital transformation, or we have to have a technology that can help us to be efficient, to reduce the intensity of the carbon that we produce from oil and gas, fossil fuels. So I think UAE want to have the most or leading on the carbon. I think already we are in the lowest carbon intensity on their hydrocarbon. That's itself, it's a big challenge. We even never dreamed about it. Now we are in. So that's proof that UAE, whenever they plan, we'll end up with the action plan. And we are really proud to see and to hear that UAE is producing that lowest carbon intensity, and thinking about hosting 28 is that another part of the journey that UAE want to lead in the region. So for us, collaboration, cooperation, working together, including the finance, funding this mega project is the key. Without it, I think we will be slow and we will not reach our goal in 2050, which we pledged to reach net zero.
Absolutely. Badar, on that point, I mean, obviously our discussion today, again, the big word in it is probably acceleration. That's really what we're looking at here. What's the region's role in accelerating the energy transition from COP27 to COP28? As mentioned, there's been some delays. Paris Climate Agreement is already 7 years ago. We're only now getting to the damage and loss fund. Where is the acceleration opportunity? What is the partnership that gets us acceleration? Is it developed economies and developing economies walking hand in hand now after the loss and damage fund?
Sean, I think we see that the acceleration will only happen through collaboration, and collaboration has to happen at an international scale. It has to not only be encompassing financial flows, it has to be collaboration on policies, on regulatory practices, best technological practices, new business models, right? All those aspects go hand in hand to accelerate any journey, but in particular the energy transition. The public-private partnership is critical. The involvement of multilaterals is essential. I would like to give an example of Egypt's feed-in tariffs initiative when it was launched. The first phase did not attract credible investments. The reservations were around the foreign exchange risk, the lack of arbitration. Once those challenges were addressed and international best practices were adopted, you saw investments by EBRD, by IFC, right? Similarly, you have the World Bank Solar Skilling Program, which effectively tries to put a policy framework around enabling the partnership, private-public partnership. And after that framework, you saw the first project getting awarded to a UE champion for the 100 megawatt initiative. Subsequently, Uzbekistan has launched a number of initiatives around renewables. I think 5 gigawatts of wind energy, and if I'm not mistaken, 3 gigawatt of I think solar energy. So clearly, it is the collaboration at international scale. All stakeholders have to contribute. For our part, Mashreq will continue to be present and do our part in facilitating the climate and the energy transition.
Engineer Aisha, just finally, your last thoughts on one thing the UAE has done very well over the last 20 years on every front, one might say, but certainly in the green economy front, is the creation of the economic opportunity and reward, the great ROI, return on investment. And I suppose 15 years ago when Masdar was being built or started, the idea that the UAE would become a leader in the economics around solar seemed a far distant dream, but nonetheless it has managed quite successfully to make the elusive come to reality in terms of the economic opportunity of the green economy. And I'm wondered from your thoughts how central that will be to this year, to COP28. The economic return, the opportunity here is significant.
Well, you took me back to actually, like you mentioned, 20 years ago when I joined my work and I started my work. And at that time, I remember when we started to read more and more about the transition of UAE toward adopting renewable energy, and we were thinking, why is that? Why UAE needs to do so? We are an oil and gas country. Why do we need to go and invest in this kind of new energy? But now we realize how wise our leadership and our founding fathers were in this regard. Well, as you mentioned, when we speak about the green economy, and it's a subject that is really very close to my heart, because I was really proud to lead the team back in 2012 to develop a green agenda for UAE that was based on green economy used as a tool for achieving sustainable development. Even that was announced in UAE and by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid when he announced the UAE Green Growth Strategy under the slogan Green Economy for Sustainable Development. That was in January 2012, even before Rio Plus 20 adopted that as a green economy as a tool, as an official tool for achieving sustainable development. So from that time, we had actually developed this green agenda, and we had focused in our green agenda on economic diversification and bringing new jobs and the new green jobs to the market.
And of course, UAE also hosted WGEO, the World Green Economy Organization, which has become a leader in that space.
And we just announced at the World Green Economy Summit, UAE joining the Global Alliance on Green Economy that WGEO had come up with. When we speak now about the way forward for the country, we had already a clear path in this regard. We had actually an integrated approach, and that approach will prioritize 6 climate change mitigation measures. These include accelerating the transition to clean energy sources, utilizing climate-friendly raw material substitutes in hard-to-abate sectors, and to reduce the waste generation and expanding the waste treatment. Also, we are focusing within those tracks or those measures on green mobility-oriented development and increasing the energy efficiency across all sectors. And of course, fostering R&D in the direct air capture and carbon capture and utilization and storage, to also small and medium nuclear sector, a nuclear reactor industry. So that pathway strategy that we had announced back in COP27 has and will deliver significant benefits. It's projected to result in an annual cumulative GDP growth of 3%, and it will create 200,000 jobs across the economy, and we expect to future-proof existing jobs by greening our industry. So just to conclude with Sean, if you allow me,
please.
We therefore believe that partnering on climate action is an opportunity to tackle the broader issues that we have of peace and economic development, which will in turn align with what we announced in our UAE Net Zero Pathways. Also, we need to steer the discussion as part of our role as a presidency for the COP28, and of course to ensure the commitment and the innovative solutions to be in place in order to have a kind of a legacy from organizing this COP here in UAE. So by this, I would like to conclude my part and to thank you for organizing this interesting, I would say, dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aisha. Badar, as our host, and Mashreq Bank as our host, to give your closing comments and final thoughts for this podcast.
So, well, I would like to sort of thank my co-panelists. Extremely insightful and extremely delighted to hear the continued rollout of the initiatives ahead of COP28. We as a regional and in particular a local UAE champion financial institution, we are more than excited to actually partner and contribute towards this journey, and we're looking forward towards the COP28, where you will be hosting and will be leading the presidency for the event.
Well, thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to have hosted and moderated this session, and of course addressing the very important question of the region's role in accelerating the energy transition. COP27 and COP28 hosting this events in the region is a great privilege, is a great honor, but with that obviously comes a responsibility to advance and accelerate this meeting this challenge, and I have no doubt that we will meet that. Thank you for joining us on the Mashreq Sustainable Finance Dialogues podcast, and it gives me great pleasure to thank you, Masood Al-Hamadi, Exploration and Production Manager of SNOC, and of course Engineer Aisha Al-Abdouli, Director, Green Development and Climate Change at the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment at the UAE. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.